Antonblast is a game I've been looking forward to for years. I often miss the initial hype on new game releases due to either my cynicism or just being out of touch, but since I've learned about it, I knew this game was going to be special. You can compare it on a surface level to Wario Land 4 with the GBA-inspired pixel art and brutish protagonist, fused with a really strong 90s punk energy with a lot of Crash Bandicoot influence easily visible from the very start, but the game is significantly more than that. Listing the influences so flatly makes me feel like a game critic, but I need to make a baseline for the game so I can build my case on why I think it kicks ass. Being a Wario-like, it invites a lot of comparisons to Pizza Tower, a Wario Land-inspired platformer that came out last year. This comparison is only worth noting because it's one of the best platformers in recent time, one of the most beloved indie games in the past couple of years, and personally one of my favorite games of all time. But Antonblast is good enough that it doesn't really warrant a comparison, so all I'll say on the subject is that Pizza Tower is most similar to the series mechanically, while crafted an entirely unique aesthetic that blends zany cartoons with MS Paint pixel art, while Antonblast is much more Wario Land aesthetically but plays significantly differently. Mix it in the precision platforming and box breaking of Crash with a central movement system that feels most like Donkey Kong Country to me. These games are both worth your time and I'd say you should play both, but if you're really craving more Wario in your life and need to pick one, I don't know why you'd want just a clone of the game you already enjoy with new names attached, but I think Pizza Tower will scratch that itch more. That doesn't mean it's better, it just has more in common from a gameplay standpoint, borrowing Wario's basically entire moveset from 4. But again, these games are different enough that I don't even want to think about Pizza Tower for the rest of the video. And to show I mean business, I'm banning the words pizza and tower from my vocabulary until the video ends. Anyway, Antonblast's plot is really representative of the game. He's told on this absolutely beautiful 2D animated cutscene which looks fantastic. Satan is jealous that Anton is more red than him, so he steals all of his alcohol. The fact that it's beer gives it this T-rated edginess that's really cute. I imagine if this game was released back in the 90s, the devs would be cracking up thinking about how subversive it is that their platform mascot is an implied alcoholic. It's weird that mascots always used to have trademark favorite foods though. I think this started with Bugs Bunny and carrots, even though rabbits don't actually like carrots, he used an impression of a movie character. Even cartoons in the 30s were relying on film references. Anyway, it's always been weird to me because it's what I call psyop humor. Like how old sitcoms like Full House would just have characters repeat their catchphrases and we were supposed to think that's automatically funny. Even The Simpsons started doing this and they made jokes that were just, get it? Superintendent Chalmers says Skinner. And here he's saying, sinner. I don't think I've ever laughed at a character's favorite food in my entire life. Apart from that one time Cosmo was really into cheese pants, but that's a one-time gag, not the basis for his character. But you're kind of supposed to pretend this stuff is funny? Bugs Bunny likes carrots, Sonic likes chili dogs in the cartoons and nowhere else, the Ninja Turtles love pizza. I like it for Anton because of the aforementioned charm, but also the entire story is so willing to be dumb that it's extremely entertaining. Anton is a fun, likable character due to, like the whole game, he wears his influences on his sleeve while crafting an appeal entirely new. Wario always had this anti-authority vibe to him, where it kind of felt like he spat in the face of the conventions of platform mascots. But since it was Nintendo, they didn't directly shit on anyone. Combining that with the mindless destruction and zaniness that Crash had, complete with the fuck Nintendo attitude of his marketing, makes Anton feel right at home in the late 90s and early 2000s. It kind of feels like he'd have a 3D platformer sequel on the PS2 that's really good but sold poorly, and you look back at it and think, man, that game was so good, and you play it again and it still is, and the humor is really funny, except it also contains one of the most horribly offensive jokes you've ever seen. Like Ace Ventura level shit. Anton being made in the modern day means that he can be injected with all the charm of that skater punk adjacent in-your-face attitude era of video game marketing without being annoying or uncomfortable. Like, I don't think we really need multiple advertisements of Anton mercilessly murdering all of his peers. Imagine if indie games made these kinds of "our competition sucks and we fucking ate them" advertisements and you saw them have heated arguments on Twitter. It's like if you saw the Genesis Does commercial on TV in 1991, then went outside and saw Shigeru Miyamoto and Yuji Naka fist fighting in a parking lot. The only universal constant at every timeline would be that Yuji Naka is in jail. A lot of newer titles like this, Boom Buster, Hi-Fi Rush, Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, and even obscure shit like Vibe and Vendetta have this kind of graffiti punk-inspired style that I have a strong desire to name. I've heard Shibuya punk be thrown around, but I tried doing some research and I can't find any genuine info on it. One of the first results is a hard drive article making fun of its non-existence. With the big beat influence of a lot of these games' soundtracks, and by big beat I mean Hideki Naganuma, my mind wants to jump to something like beatcore, hyperfunk, funk, punk. These names all make me feel ill. So if anyone wants to take a crack at naming this aesthetic in the comments, you're welcome to. Yes, I'm the asshole that compartmentalizes aesthetics into neat categories. You know what I'm about. Antonblast has a lot of shades of this aesthetic, but doesn't go entirely into it. You get the feeling that right outside the game's borders, a game of Tony Hawk Pro Skate is being played with insane trick combos, but Anton himself doesn't care. He's too old and grumpy to get with the times. It's reminiscent of how Wario Land 4 was often very laid back and atmospheric, almost the entire green world is, but Wario himself never embodied it. He felt felt like an outsider being thrust into whatever scenario was next. Anton has the same dichotomy, but in a different environment. It's really cool. Annie, meanwhile, will probably just eat the skateboard instead of riding it. Speaking of, Annie is genuinely one of the best female characters in video games. She's cute, but doesn't have to be traditionally cutesy or girly. She gets treated the exact same way Anton is, and she revels in her own brand of wacky chaos. Antonblast is the feminist game of the year, and I'm not even joking a little. In general, the cast, despite a lot of them not getting much screen time, are super memorable. I love that Anton, semi-XP of Wario, has his own XP in the form of Danton. I wonder if Danton has his own XP, like an infinite lineage of knockoffs started with Mario, who in himself started as an XP of Popeye, who is based on a real person the creator knew. This family tree is messed up, it's like the turtles all the way down. I wish we got even more dialogue with the cast, but I understand the restraint. Anton and Brulo have a legendary dynamic. These guys deserve a series of Conjun House-esque shorts where Anton's entire goal is just to get a beer from Brulo. This is the worst dialogue ever. They do a really good job fleshing out an entire cast and world for Anton, pushing him even further away from his inspiration. And I could basically just find and replace the same sentence to talk about the gameplay, really. Gameplay borrows a lot from Wario Land 4's structure. There's a handful of big linear levels with collectibles defined that all end in an escape sequence, timing you to get back to the beginning of the stage. Some levels also have unique transformations that fit the theme of the stage. That's really all they took. If you squint, the clutch and atomic bomb are kind of like the shoulder bash and ground pound, but the movement differs a lot. When you perform a clutch boost, this meter fills up. When the meter is red, press the button again and you gain a small amount of speed. This is based off of the drift mechanics from Crash Team Racing, which I love, but it reminded me a lot more of bunny hopping in Quake and Source Engine games, especially when you can literally B-hop. If you jump after a boost and then clutch once you land, no matter the timing, you'll boost again. This is probably based on the kind of bunny hopping you can perform on Virtual Boy Wario Land, and the super horizontal levels definitely evoke it, but I wonder if anyone at Summitsphere has played these types of games and took inspiration from this movement. If there's ever an Antonblast sequel, which I'd prefer they not do and try something else, but I think make it an FPS that translates the clutch boost into a 3D space would be the perfect direction to go. Also, an FPS with this aesthetic would be such a fucking breath of fresh air. Regardless, Crash Bandicoot is heavily noted as a secondary influence, and you can see a lot of the attitude carried over. The heavy use of crates and traces of precision platforming really feel like they're echoing the classic Crash formula, and the collectathon nature and alternate modes for each level make the comparison even closer. But calling this game Wario x Crash feels really misleading, almost like you're setting up to pull the rug from under the player. Honestly, if I picked a single 2D platformer that most reminded me of, I'd probably say Rayman Legends, as you almost perform this shitty version of B-hopping naturally, since the dash attack to jump is the best way of traversal. The weird exotic levels really bring that feeling closer. As I said, the game is beautiful Game Boy Advance-esque pixel art that is genuinely breathtaking at times. Some of the backgrounds are gorgeous and the fluidity of the animations is extremely impressive. While Wario Land 4 and Earthworm Jim seem like big inspiration, it reminds me most of Adventures of Lomax, a PS1 2D platformer with gorgeous pixel art that matches the fluidity and detail of Antonblast, but goes for a more subdued, calm palette. Anton and Annie both have entirely unique animations, and there's no co-op or anything, so there's no reason why they have to both be playable. Nobody would have minded just being Anton, but the effort is worth it. The developers claim to have an urban graffiti influence, and you can really feel that vibe on screen. These guys are not posers at all. They expertly use mixed media elements as a callback to Wario Land 4, but carefully use them in ways that feel new, and often remind me more so of the PS1. Tony Grayson is a big PS1 dweeb like me, so this is probably intentional. Retro pixel art has a bit of a stigma among indie games, and I'm not above this. I'm often very cynical of uninspired retro pixel art, but Antonblast really shows how the problem isn't the format at all, it's the style. I understand a lot of indie devs just can't draw or animate this good, but I really hope people take note of this game and try to step up their game. While going for this game's style would be very hard, it's not difficult to create a distinct identity if you just know the tools. I'm not a 2D artist at all, but I study color and character design, and it's genuinely really fun to keep in mind. Antonblast isn't good because it has detailed sprites. It's good because of the zany expressions and beautiful colors. It conveys and contextualizes things extremely well, and I think the artists deserve a ton of credit, but I hope people don't misinterpret what's great about it. The detail is to be commended, and it does pay off a lot, but it'd be nothing without the excellent character and world design. The character animation is shown off best in the boss fights, another massive highlight. All of them are absolute knockouts. I did have some problems with just not knowing what to do, but once I understood it, every fight was really strong and fun. Without spoiling, my favorite bosses were the third area boss and the final boss. The third boss has an extremely fun and memorable final phase, no spoilers, but smash. And the final boss is a very welcome challenge. It was ball-busted and some parts were a bit unfair, more on that later, but I powered through it and it felt incredible. They clearly poured everything they could into it, helped by the excellent soundtrack. Tony Grayson did all the music, and being the lead creative director, he has his finger on the pulse as to what the game should feel like. So every single song encompasses the game's atmosphere, blends the main leitmotif into every song in a perfect perfect way, and yet every single track is entirely different feeling. The first two levels set an expectation of what the music will be like, boiled down to Wario Land 4 X Sonic CD, and then everyone after goes in different directions while retaining a beautiful cohesion. At the time of recording, the soundtrack isn't available anywhere at the moment, and it actually feels like a crime. This is the only game where I've ever had genuine withdrawal being unable to find the soundtrack on YouTube on day one. These are my favorite tracks, by the way. Gameplay, visuals, sound, and story are all killer. Yes, I said story. A lot of people get confused when I praise the story of a game like this, but the thing you need to understand about storytelling in video games is that it isn't just the cutscenes and dialogue and journal entries. The plot of Antonblast is paper thin. The story is going through the levels, taking in the unique atmosphere, blasting through the game and letting the emotions it wants to make you feel overwhelm you. I felt powerful. I felt stressed. I felt like I overcome a challenge. Playing through the levels is the game's story. It made me feel powerful in the same way an action film does. A lot of developers, indie and AAA, don't seem to comprehend this because games are trying too hard to be movies. Really, video games are most similar to books. They're very railroaded and contained, but require your full attention, unlike a movie which can be put in the background. Games and books are very dependent on the audience. Books requiring you to use your imagination to visualize the words, and games requiring you to overcome challenges to progress the story. Thinking that you have to have cutscenes and constant dialogue to have a real video game story is like thinking you need pictures to tell a real story in a book. Sure, maybe a film like RoboCop is deeper and has more to say on the real world, but both it and Antonblast provoke emotions out of me, make me want to talk about them, reflect on how they made me feel, discuss them with other people, and that makes them art. And frankly, I'd say it's a success for storytelling. It's a success for art in general. Overall, Antonblast is fantastic. I have some critiques, but any problem I have with the game could be easily patched, which is always a great sign. The biggest issue I have is clarity. I don't know how playtested this game was, but it often feels like the game struggles with telling you what to do. But there were multiple times when I was streaming the game where chat had to tell me what to do because the game just didn't explain a mechanic. In Mad Mall, there are these keys that you have to knock into locks to open them, and it's very fun, but the game suddenly expected me to realize that sliding into them has a different arc than clutch boosting? How do I hate this level so much. How do I get it up there? What? Oh, I gotta slide under the key. Okay. Wow, I would have not have figured that out for a long time. In other levels, the game explains stuff like this to you via these Anton projections, so I think having one placed here that tells you to slide into it would be the best move. Alternatively, if you don't have the space for it, Boombuster experiments with gag-based tutorials, with this graffiti saying, "I freaking heart backflips" to remind you of their existence. Just having graffiti up that says "Slide dickhead" or something would be perfect. Again with sliding, the final boss against Satan, without wishing to spoil, is near impossible until you realize you can slide under him in his first phase. The game has no signifier of this, and I was pulling out my hair until someone in chat told me what to do. I also got stuck inside him. Multiple times. My second big issue is the game's spectacle. There's a very Sonic energy with how the game enjoys just showing you cool shit as a reward for completing a platforming challenge, bouncing you around the stage for some visual eye candy. This is fine, it's fun, it's exciting, but it starts to get really fucking annoying when you try going for a cracked run, and especially in time trials. Basically, if you beat a boss without getting hit, you get a little cracked icon below the name. This is, for the most part, a very challenging but very satisfying task, and you get nothing for it other than a little icon, so it's not the end of the world, but these bosses sometimes don't feel designed for this kind of challenge in mind. Jewel Ghoul, the first big boss, is perfect. All of the attacks are fun to avoid, there's a lot of strategy and skill involved, and it's only two phases with no fluff in between. It's a very strong finale for the first world of the game. Freako Dragon was much harder but still felt manageable, but the second phase felt like rolling a dice until, this might sound familiar, someone in my stream chat told me what to do. The third boss, the sexy one, goes on for way too long. The first phase is very fun, very exciting, on par with the rest, but the second phase is when it feels like I'm doing something the game never thought I would want to. There is a super long cutscene at the time of recording is unskippable, and then you spend like 30 seconds just moving left and right with no real hazards, and then you dodge a bunch of projectiles with no player control, just keep moving around, and then phase 3. The other bosses in the game are so good, and they fantastically balance player control and enemy control. You're constantly attacking, the enemy's constantly attacking. They're very dynamic bosses that feel like an evolution of Wario Land 4's bosses. Yeah, phase 2 is memorable and funny on a first time playthrough. I laughed hard at it, but on a repeat visit, it's like anti-replayability. And to be clear, the difficulty isn't the issue. I want to be the guy as one of my favorite games of all time. The problem is in the pacing. It takes so long to get into the actual meaty fun challenge that it's annoying, doesn't feel worth it. And then in time trial, trials, it's arguably worse. Time trials are extremely fun and ridiculously addicting, except for when you're just sitting there watching shit explode for the 8th time. Yeah, the spectacle is cool and wow number go up and nice sound, but it made me think of the worst of getting the A ranks in Sonic Adventure 2. It never gets to that degree in Antonblast, but if you let me to play an extreme devil's advocate, I really think you could tear out all of the spectacle and the game would be overall better. Like, it was enjoyable on a first-time playthrough, but nobody would be clamoring for it if it wasn't there. The team would obviously never remove these and have the games out, and it'd be weird if they did. I'm not asking them to, but I think it's something to note. Here's a very big game design lesson that I think modern Sonic especially needs to remember. Playing a game well makes you feel cool. If the game feel is tuned right and the challenge is high enough, just conquering it with no flair makes you feel cooler than 1,000 of these spectacle moments. Someone in a podcast I listened to called this bayonetification for Shadow Generations, and I think about that a lot. Again, Antonblast never gets to that level, there's no stupid QuickTime events, but it's something to think about, and it's how I feel. You can, however, make the argument that all the game really needs is to just be the best it can on that initial playthrough, and that these moments make the game more memorable and cement the experience for that first timer. That true fans will always suffer through it, and I totally get that, and in some ways I really agree. I'd be really interested to hear what anyone at Summitsphere has to say about this. Tony specifically has talked about how intentional the game design is, how they took a lot of risks. I'd love to interview any of the devs and get their perspectives, since these are clearly people that thought about this game a lot. I just have certain qualms with their approach. But I could totally get countered with a solid argument. The floor is yours. I could go on and on. This could easily be a 10-hour video, but I have other videos I need to work on. Let's wrap this up. Antonblast is a really good game. More than that, it escapes what inspires it, that is said many times. In the beginning of the video, I hypothesized a scenario where I was recommending my friend who was a Wario Land fan a game to fill that void. I want to face that hypothetical head on, because there's one armor-piercing question to every single one of these retro throwback games. Why do you want a game you already like just with the copyright changed? It's never going to be superior because you don't have any nostalgic memories or emotions tied to it. When Donkey Kong was being developed, they didn't just steal Popeye, Olive Oil, and Bluto, they designed characters that had their own niche, and evolved even further beyond that initial concept, into an entire universe detached from what spawned it. Instead of trying to cling on to something from the past, games like Antonblast take what was beloved and mix it into something that a new generation can be nostalgic for. One proof? People are already getting nostalgic for indie games like Undertale. Hell, they were nostalgic for it when the game was like 4 years old, because it crafted its own identity, and people that initially had no interest in the game it was inspired by can look back and find an old classic with a new perspective. I played Earthbound for the first time long after Undertale, and I ended up liking Earthbound a lot more. I don't say that to put down Undertale, I more so say it because it shows you the power of these retro throwbacks done right. Years away from now, we're gonna start seeing games inspired by Antonblast, from the people that played it when they were young, and they're gonna spin it off into their own games that feel wholly themselves. I think that's what indie games should inspire to be. I tongue-in-cheekily ban any discussion of Antonblast's older cousin, but I want to bring Pizza Tower back up, not as a Wario-like or any other meaningless nomenclature, but as an extremely strong indie game made by an eccentric, passionate team. These two are up there with Undertale, Celeste, Cuphead, The Binding of Isaac, and Hollow Knight. You can't reanimate the past, but you can carve the future. Pizza Tower already has countless mods and fan games. All of these examples have, and I have a strong feeling Antonblast would have the same. Anyone at Summitsphere, if you're watching, I think you're really onto something. You've proven yourselves as a team that I want to follow for the rest of your existence. After taking a deserved break, I hope you guys try something entirely new. I love the Anton world, but I'm ready to get blindsided by another smash hit. Don't just make Anton games, please. I'd love to see these characters come back, but you've shown a limitless level of creativity and polish, and I want to see you tackle a whole new genre with your trademark eccentricity. If I may be vulnerable for a moment, something I'm not good at, I kind of put up this facade of being the smart person in the room, the speaker of truth about video games and their design, and while I believe I can back up my research and philosophy, I'm kind of a hack. I've tried for years to make video games, and I still am. I know firsthand how hard it is to make something like Antonblast, how hair-pulling it can be, but how satisfying the turnout is. I teased it in another video, but I've had this retro first-person shooter in the works for almost 3 years now, and it's been an absolute nightmare even just getting a team for it. I've tried programming it myself multiple times, and I've tried to get multiple people to do it for me, but it just never works out. Finding your clique is hard, and seeing such a passionate team can easily make you feel envious and spiteful that Summitsphere or Torta Pizza or whoever lucked out by just managing to find an extremely talented and passionate crew. It's really easy to take what you have for granted. The grass is always greener, and I hope any game developer of any level watching this knows that their skill is rare and valued, that you deserve any amount of fame or fortune you've been given, no matter how small or how massive. My journey is still beginning, and I can only hope to be where you are right now. Until then, I love Antonblast, student. I love Summitsphere. You killed it. Get some rest. I put out enough projects, know how it feels to have your baby thrust onto the world and just want to sleep forever. Speaking of, I gotta get some rest as well. Have a great 2025, everybody. I was gonna make a Games of the Year video, but my schedule got totally fucked in the last month. Here's my list if you're curious. Also, if there are any MILFy programmer girls out there, my DMs are open.